What is the most wildly unprofessional behavior you've seen from a candidate or new hire? I was co-manager of the audience services department of a ballet company. We'd hired on 3 temps to help support our box office staff through the Nutcracker season, which is both the name of the production and also a descriptive name for the months of November to January. It's an extremely stressful time. In February, our bosses told us, my co-manager and I, that we could keep 2 of the 3 temps on permanently, full-time, and offer them raises and benefits. So we sent out an email letting them know about the opportunity and that we would be interviewing them separately in the coming week. One of the temps I'd hired, I later really regretted hiring. Of the 3, let's call her 3, ended up having the worst work ethic, but we hired her because she was the most knowledgeable about ballet, having worked around in the local theater scene for many years. It made it easy for her to banter with our more serious, traditional ballet patrons, who can be kind of stern and gruff. And she could speak multiple languages, which was super helpful. But she was intentionally passively lazy, if that's a thing. She would, for example, be helping someone on the phone, put them on hold to ask me how to process something special they needed, and when I would lean over to show her, she would release the hold button and go, "My boss is here to help you with this," and literally leave the desk. So instead of me training her on the thing, I did the thing for her, and then had to hunt her down and ask her to come back to her desk. She always acted like I was making a big deal out of nothing. Sometimes she'd do this and walk out of the entire building and come back with food, and then still take her hour lunch break. She was always bothering the dancers in the rehearsal studio, letting the phones just ring and ring. She was mean to one of the other temps in that mean girl way. I'd never have the balls to wear that dress. "You're really brave," or tossing things over at her desk spot like paper clips and loose staples. We always told her to cut it out. We were all in our 30s, by the way. I should add that this was my first job as a manager who employed staff, so I had my own things to learn about being more assertive. So the interviews come around. The first 2 go well. My co-manager and I both already knew we were going to keep the other 2 temps and let 3 go. But we went through the same questions and process as we did the others. At the end, when we were saying our "thanks, we'll let you know," she suddenly says loudly, "Oh, I just saw that the next show is going to be Bolero. I ducking hate Bolero. It's the one piece of music I cannot stand. It's so repetitive and boring. Oh my God, it's so boring and awful. I hate it so much." So we didn't choose to keep her. And when she found out, she threw a literal temper tantrum. The temp up period ended on that Friday. I think this was a Tuesday or Thursday. Up until the week before, all temps had been expecting to be let go on Friday, but she really thought she had it in the bag. She answered box office calls and intentionally ducked up the orders, creating a mess for us managers. 1 and 2 called my office extension and told me she was knocking things off the display station and swearing on the phone with customers. My co-manager went to investigate, and she was in the ballet studio with the dancers ranting to them about how unfair it was she wasn't going to stay on. I went to AP and had her final check and pay stub drawn up, found her, pulled her aside, and said, "Because of your behavior, we're going to let you go now." So she grabbed her stuff with a bunch of duck you and instead of leaving, sat in the vestibule area, where patrons and families of the performers often wait, by the front doors. Every time someone came in, she said something crafty about our company. I told her she was now trespassing. She screamed and yelled. It was such an unnecessarily dramatic scene. Story 2. We hired a guy who came recommended from an employee. His resume had a solid IT background. I trusted the employee who recommended him, so I didn't really tech him out in the interview. I more just saw if he was a fit with the group. We are all wise asses who duck with each other, so you need thick skin to work with us. He definitely fit in. I could see we could joke with him. We were going to Memphis for a week to integrate a company we bought into our network. He asked to come, and I said yes. This was about a week before we were scheduled to leave. We get to Memphis, and we start installing all the new technology. I immediately realize he doesn't even know how to hook a computer up. Shocking, but not a big deal. I have someone show him, and he moves on. An hour after we start, he's sitting down saying his back hurts and he can't run wires under desks. Annoying, but whatever, he was an extra person, so it didn't slow us down. That night, we all finish for the night, and we go to a famous BBQ place by Beale Street to eat, then to a bar up the street. He gets so drunk, he goes up to some girl who was with a guy and puts his arm around her. She is visibly disgusted by him as we pull him away and apologize to them. He's talking crap the whole time to us, that we're cock-blocking him, and by the way, she was looking at him. He knows she wants him. I should probably note this guy is like 5'5", maybe 110 pounds soaking wet. Of the group of us, 5 of us go to the gym regularly and are in very good shape. He threatens the data center manager, who is the only small one of our group, saying never to cock-block him again. We decide to put him in a cab and send him back to the hotel, and we'll deal with it tomorrow. We walk him toward the exit, and on the way, he goes up to a group of guys and pushes one of them. When the rest of the guys with that guy started coming at him, he literally ran behind us and yelled, "Let's duck them up." I was dumbfounded. He thought he was going to start a fight with a group of guys, and we would have his back. At this point, we were so tired of him, we all stepped to the side and watched as a group of guys literally picked him up and carried him outside and tossed him on the ground. A few minutes later, a cop pulls up and arrests him. He had the balls to call me the next day to ask if we could come bail him out. When I said no, he actually said, "Come on, bro, you can expense it." Needless to say, he was fired and sent home early. The best part is when they changed his flight, they canceled the car service for the original return date and never got him another one. He kept calling me from Newark Airport, leaving messages saying he couldn't find his driver and was stranded at the airport. The craziest part is about a year later, I got a call from someone asking if I knew him. It took me a minute to even remember who he was when they said his name. Turns out he was applying for a job and checked yes that they could call me for a reference. Story 3, wild but true. A woman was due to be interviewed by a panel. Me, 1 out of 5. Turns out the director, head of panel, was her husband, who abandoned her and their 4 kids, fled their home country on falsified papers, staged a fake death/missing person scenario, changed his name, and started a new life. After 6 years of searching for him, she always believed he was too vain to off himself, and she wanted a legal divorce. She ended up getting one under a presumed death, abandonment reason in her home country. She obtained U.S. citizenship, and with the help of a former military-trained intelligence agent/turned PY, who met her while on a tourist vacation in her home country and heard her story. Her and the PI spent years searching and finally located him. All the while, she legally obtained U.S. citizenship, and then she relocated with her kids to the state/city. When she walked in, the director's face went Casper White. She started yelling in her native language and pointing at him. She had papers in hand and a pen and wanted him to sign, I guess. He started shouting in their native language, then started hyperventilating, let out a blood-curdling no, then tried to run full speed out of the conference room, only to run straight into the PI, an immigration and FBI agent. He then tried to pivot around them and make a second attempt to run and ended up crashing into and through the conference room glass door and knocked himself unconscious. All of us are still clueless about what's happening or their connection. She matched his energy in her native tongue and looked menacing, confronting him. Then, like Jekyll Hyde, she turns back to us, lowers her tone, smiles politely, and asks if she can still interview. Legally, she was entitled to an interview, so we grabbed the assistant director to step in as the 5th member. She was professional, as if the last 15 to 20 minutes had never happened. Understandably, we are all rattled and pondering WTF is going on, yet trying to maintain a semblance of professionalism. Meanwhile, she is handling business with the interview question. A few hours later, the CEO did an emergency meeting and informed everyone on the basics he knew of regarding the director and gave the entire department 3 days off while the agents investigated the director's personal and professional life and activity. She didn't get the job, but the assistant director referred her to a rival agency and she was hired by them, where she's employed to this day. The former director got deported and then jailed in his home country. To this day, he tries to contact her and begs for another chance. Says he's ready to be a husband and father and asks her to sponsor him, pay his fines, etc. She's now remarried to an immigration lawyer. FYI, their story also made it to a crime IDTV episode. Now, when I see her around the town, I speak and say, "What's up, Black Widow?" I won't give away her name or the city/town/state we're in, but if you ever stumble across her path, she has no issue with talking about the story and its outcome. Story 4. Had a girl apply that I don't know if she applied herself or applied with the help of a parent. Her mother was the one who called to make the initial interview appointment. She was 17, soon to be 18, first or second time. She came into work, her mother was with her, dropping her off right at the door. Her mother came in to speak to me and told me it was my job to watch her little girl. I honestly didn't know how to respond to that. I just told her that while her daughter worked for our company, it was against company policy to allow her daughter to leave without permission. And after she clocked out for the day, her daughter's whereabouts are no longer my concern. A week later, her daughter called out for work, which is allowed. Her mother is not the one that needs to call her out. Her mother showed up to the store and immediately starts yelling at me that she needs to know where her daughter is. At this point, I was deep into reports and literally did not have time for any of it, but I helped her by seeing if I can talk to coworkers who may have some indication where her daughter might be. She then tells me that it's my fault because I allowed her daughter to call out without her permission. She was totally fine, by the way. She called out so that she could go to school early and leave late due to a test and didn't think it was necessary to tell her mom. She arrived home around 6 p.m. whenever she would normally be at least halfway through her shift. And this is when her mom came to the store. Her phone died when she was at school and didn't think to borrow anyone's phone, borrow the office phone or anything to call her mom. This went on for a couple more weeks later until she turned 18. On her 18th birthday, she moved out of the house and quit her job. She didn't walk yet, but she was finished with school. She was actually a really good worker, but her mother had the single worst case of helicopter parent I've ever seen. She looked like she thought she was a prisoner in her own home and in her own life. I actually felt really bad for her. I understood that she wanted to quit without notice. With everything that girl went through, I wasn't shocked or mad at all that she chose not to give a 2-week notice. Her mom came to the store one final time and told me that it was my fault that her daughter chose to leave the house at 18 and that I and the store had lost her business for good. Yep, her psycho mother had gone into the store that day just to tell me she wasn't coming back as a customer. To this day, I still have no idea why everything was my fault, but that woman gave me full-blown anxiety every time I saw her. Story 5. 3 years ago, a guy had COVID and a stomach bug. We found out post-interview. He said, hold on, and ran in his bathroom, crap his brains out, door open, no mute, camera on. Comes back sweating, then realizes he didn't mute or turn off his camera. He bombed the rest of the interview. He sent an apology post-interview via email explaining everything, so we scheduled him again a week later. He ended up getting selected for one of the vacancies. I crap you not. Story 6, a bait and switch. This company, which had a local base of operations in an industrial park which should have been the first clue, would send out an amazing candidate, well-spoken, immaculately dressed, and highly educated person who was easygoing and charming, had an impeccable resume, perfectly tailored for the job description. Always an Indian guy, which is relevant for this story. If we hired him, they would send another Indian guy. Same name, and in fact, we later discovered the candidate we interviewed would claim the name of the actual guy we'd later hire. They figured Americans can't tell one Indian from another, which I guess was sort of true at the time. This was early 2000. I think they did this to my company a few times before they sent a guy who was extremely different. The guy my team interviewed was vastly different than the one who showed up. The one we interviewed was like I described. The guy who showed up was short, fat, arrived in a linen shirt, dirty slacks, and sandals. Our new hires had to go to a different campus for paperwork, badging, and orientation, so I was not witness to this spectacle. But the reports were alarming. The first was that this guy barely spoke English, so he showed up to the wrong areas. He was unable to fill out the paperwork properly because he had a literacy problem. Next, he didn't have the proper ID, and that caused some problems with HR. During one of his exchanges, he passed by the head of HR and slapped her ass hard and laughed. I was in too much shock to say anything at first, she later said. During orientation, he kicked his sandals off and placed his crusty bare feet on the back of a chair and ate a greasy sandwich, wiping the grease onto his shirt. My boss got a call about it the day he arrived, and he retold the scene as it was unfolding. He had to drive out there, and he said, "That is not the guy we hired." But the ID, he had said, "Yeah, that's the same name." The ID, by the way, was a worker's visa and a foreign passport. The requirements of the job definitely specified that he had to be a U.S. citizen. This turned out to be a saving grace of suspending the guy from hire, because that was a legal requirement. So after that incident, we went through all the candidates we got from that agency and realized that the person who showed up was different than the person who interviewed. Luckily, it was only 2 to 3 people, and they weren't actually doing poorly as employees. But we blocked that agency from sending candidates after that. Story 7. I have one that I think it's actually good. This was a new hire who crashed another department's potluck and threw herself on the floor and started screaming and crying that they were trying to hurt her. She had been with us for about a month. A department was having a potluck for an employee on their last day, and everyone had brought a dish to share. Someone had brought ceviche, and someone else had brought a Middle Eastern dish with shrimp. It's to die for. Don't know what it's called, but this employee brings it to every potluck because everyone raves over it. This potluck was only for that department. It was held in their own department. It was not in the break room or a common area. I don't know why this employee went into this department since she was not invited to the potluck. She walked over to the table of food, yelled, "OMG, there's shrimp here. You are all trying to hurt me." Then she throws herself on the floor and starts rolling around while hysterically crying and saying that they are trying to hurt her. One of the directors told her to get up and stop being so dramatic. She did get up and go back to her department and finish out the day, but she called out the next day. I know shellfish allergy is severe, deadly, but the employee didn't eat or touch the shrimp, and she had never mentioned a shellfish allergy prior to this, and she did eat the popcorn. Shrimp lunch special the week before. I saw her. We have an on-site restaurant, and employees get a free meal every day. Every Friday, the chef serves seafood for lunch and dinner, and this employee never asked about cross-contamination or for special accommodations on Fridays. He almost always serves shrimp for lunch on Fridays, and again, she never brought up her allergy to him, so we know she was full of crap. Story 8. I had an interview with a hiring manager who proceeded to tell me how rich she was and that she looked at my Facebook profile to see if we had mutual friends and then proceeded to tell me she dug for dirt. Then went on to tell me we went to rival high schools and that she knew my high school boyfriend. Mind you, I graduated in the 90s and this interview was about 7 years ago. I told her this wasn't a good fit and she needed to move on with her life. My favorite just happened last week. We had a new hire last 2 days and tell us we weren't God-fearing Christians and they weren't comfortable around us. And we weren't professional because we all wear jeans, Vans, have visible tattoos, and the men had long hair. I laughed so hard. Good luck, buddy, and don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. We also had an employee claim harassment, and when they went to pull the camera footage, you could audibly hear this person trying to get another person to hook up with them. And when the employee ignored this person's advances, they came to me with a harassment claim. That was a fun case to handle. They had no idea the cameras picked up sound. Story 9. I hired a guy after he had worked as a temp for me for about 4 months. He was odd but worth giving a shot. On day 1 of his full-time employment, I sent him home within 2 hours of starting his shift. Another employee, M, moved Jay's tools so M could work. Jay heard his tool bag hit the floor, then saw M laughing with 2 other employees. Jay instantly jumped to the conclusion that M threw his toolbar and was laughing with the 2 other guys because he just disrespected Jay. So Jay came over and threw M's tool bag, which contained M's cell phone, and the screen was cracked. The next day, I wrote Jay up for throwing M's bag. He said he would not sign it unless I wrote M up too, because he started it. Up to HR, we go on Jay's second full day with the company. Our HR dept is very slow to take action, so I ended up having to deal with Jay for a few months until he got himself fired for trying to fight and threatening the other employee. When we called to terminate, he said we couldn't because we did not give him a warning not to threaten somebody. Had another guy show up on his 4th day as a temp, hammered and stumbling through the plant at 7:20 a.m. We put him in a wheelchair, called him a cab, and told him not to come back. After that, it clicked why this guy had patents in his name. Could have been an engineer in our company, but was only applying for a technician role. Story 10. This is petty, but since it just happened yesterday, it's all I can think of at the moment. All new hires, due to a state requirement, have to complete computer training before they officially start working. It's just a series of educational videos with a test at the end of each one. This new hire will be a caregiver, so the training videos are on subjects like fall risks, dementia, first aid, etc. I don't know how it happened, but this new hire was out on the floor yesterday, despite having 6 trainings left to complete, which is a big no-no. And the state will sanction us if they come in and see this. After we pulled her off the floor and instructed her to finish the last 6 trainings, she asked if she could just do it tomorrow. We again explained that she cannot be on the floor working without having completed these videos. And yet she asked if she could finish tomorrow and tried to negotiate. It was like talking to my kids. Seriously, it wasn't up for debate. It was like I was telling her to clean her room, and she was telling me she wanted to do something else first, and that she'd clean her room tomorrow as if it was a negotiation. The employee was told to go do it now, and yet she repeatedly asked if she'd come back tomorrow to do it. She didn't want to go back on the floor either. She wanted to go home, despite only being here for 3 hours, and then come back tomorrow to finish the training. Story 11. I hired someone who interviewed very well but didn't have the most impressive resume. There were a lot of gaps and short tenured roles, but the position we were hiring for was entry-level and quality of candidates was pretty bad. He was the least bad of the bunch, and this was a second attempt to recruit. In the first 2 weeks, he had only worked 3 days and the role was already part-time. The reasons he said for taking days off ranged from food poisoning, family emergencies to being hospitalized. It was all too dramatic to be true. I decided to do some detective work and dedicated a couple of days to looking at his background. After doing a deep dive on his resume, LinkedIn and socials, I discovered that he was homeless and living in his car, spent a year in prison because he and his friend filled up an unlicensed car at a gas station and drove off without paying, was involved in a court case where a friend of his was driving 100 kilometers over the speed limited under the influence, and ended up killing someone, and had a real estate license before losing it for fraud. It was the deepest and most unbelievable rabbit hole I ever went down, and was equally upsetting and entertaining. He also mentioned in the interview that he was dealing with cancer, which was why he hadn't been working recently. That turned out to be a lie. We went to terminate him the next day he came in, but his sister needed emergency surgery, so we emailed him a letter saying he no longer worked with us. While I wished he could find a way out of his demise, the help he needed was well and truly out of my scope and expertise. Story 12. Hired someone for a technical position. Seemed okay, if a bit of an underperformer. I gave instructions on how to set up 10 new laptops for a new location we were opening. I checked the 2 laptops on the workbench this person said were done and they were correct. I asked this person to do the same to the other 8, exactly like this, and they said those laptops were already back in their boxes after being completed, that these were the last 2. I trusted that statement and shipped them to the new location the following week. I flew there to set up the new office, leaving some instructions for other things I needed the person to attend to while I was gone. Upon opening the boxes at the new site, I found that only 3 of the 10 had been set up. The others were bone stock, untouched. When I called the office to ask what had happened, I was told this person had been leaving early from the moment I left town. They were never there, past 2 p.m. on a 9-to-5 salaried job. The team then forwarded me a link to several videos of dances filmed in our entryway, fully edited, synced to music, captions, art, etc., recorded during business hours, edited at the office, and posted during the business day. That was this person's last day, story 13. I've got a bit of the opposite situation. As a candidate, my CV was good enough, and I was selected for an initial recruitment screening interview. Basically just a, do you know what the job is? Are you actually qualified for it? And are you interested in it given these pay ranges? Basically, just an easy round one. It's a no-fail unless there are wild misunderstandings at play. Still, it's first contact, so professionalism is called for on both sides. About 10 minutes in, things are going well, everything is lining up fine. There's a loud beeping in the background all of a sudden. Turns out it's a smoke alarm. This HR person had decided to cook some breakfast during this call and left the bacon on too long and started a grease fire. He freaks out, doesn't know what to do, and ends up dumping his coffee on it in an attempt to put it out. If you know anything about grease fires, you know how that went. So, needless to say, the interview ended there, firefighters were called, I made it through and ended up getting the job, and I'm still there 8 years later. Story 14. Had somebody claiming in an interview that they had 6 years of experience in it, working at a place we both worked at previously. He apparently didn't recognize me. He worked there for 2 years as part of the custodial staff. Had the 25F child of a customer apply at my business. When I called to schedule an interview, the parent answered and informed me that was far too busy to deal with interviewing right now and that I should call back in 3 weeks to arrange it. I informed her that I was hoping to have the position filled by then, and Mom replied, "Then I'm just going to have to post bad reviews of your company and take my business elsewhere, unless you wait for her." The sum total of Mom's history with my shop was about $400 in work, spread across 3 years. Amusingly enough, the daughter showed up 3 weeks later, almost to the minute, hoping to schedule the interview. I informed her of the conversation with her mother and that I couldn't consider hiring her after that interaction. She leaves crying. Mom comes storming in about an hour later, throwing a giant hissy fit. How I was a trash human being for disclosing the contents of our conversation with her daughter and that they would be finding a lawyer to pursue a harassment suit for my demands for favors during the job interview. Not only were 2 other employees witness to the entire interaction with the daughter, I pointed out the security camera covering the front desk area where we were standing and said, "Do your worst." Never saw either of them again. Story 15. I had an interview with a new hire that was recommended by my HR, which they found through a temp agency. I didn't like his resume, but they said he called a few times, said he was very interested and asked for a chance to come in. I gave in, we scheduled the interview. About 15 minutes before the interview, he called and said he misunderstood the location and was in a completely different city about an hour away. It made 0 sense. HR told me he was incredibly apologetic and said he made a mistake. I told them I wasn't interested, cancel the interview. How hard is it to Google directions? HR pleaded to just reschedule, fine. The next week he shows up. The interview didn't go well. His last job was at a government organization and he showed me printouts of confidential work that he had done at the organization. Told HR that I wasn't interested after much begging, since we hadn't found a candidate and had been searching for 2 months. My HR, looking to knock this task off their list, begged to give him a chance, even if for a few weeks. His short time there was even worse than the hiring process. He upset majority of the staff he worked with and nearly came to blows with one of the managers. Meanwhile, the staff couldn't understand why we even hired him. Moral of the story, always trust your gut instincts. Story 16. A couple of years ago, I think 2, but maybe 3, time is weird, I was interviewing candidates for a hiring event. So it was just one candidate after another. One guy comes in, he was in his 70s, and talks to the coordinator of the event before he was assigned to me to interview. I came over to pick him up for his interview, whereupon I heard him making fun of the coordinator's stupid new age name from his apparently hippy-dippy parents. The guy coordinating this event was an intern, and I was already sure I wasn't going to hire anyone who would insult an intern to their face, but coordinator intern asked me to take the interview anyhow. I interviewed the guy. During the interview, he told me that he was in his 70s, but he was sure he was in better shape than me. He made it a point to tell me he biked in for his interview. He also talked down on your generation for our terrible work ethic. How are you going to insult not only the person coordinating a hiring event, but then the manager coming to interview you and expect to get hired? This guy was genuinely mad at me when I told him I was not going to recommend him for hire. He literally stomped out of the building. Story 17. Had an employee murdered another one of my employees before work. He then came to work, took off his bloody sweatshirt, put it in his locker, clocked in, and started working. I found out when the sheriffs came to the facility looking for him and took the bloody sweatshirt out of the locker. Both had worked there less than 2 weeks. Had a guy start a fist fight with another guy 10 minutes into orientation on the first day. Had a guy in his first week grab a fire axe off the wall and chase another employee with it. Had another guy that passed out at work on the first day. Paramedics said they suspected alcohol. He went to the hospital. I called to check his status, and the hospital said he must have got up and walked out. Then get a call from his hotel traveling employee that he walked in and went to the hotel bar, started drinking, and passed out at the bar. They sent him to the hospital again in an ambulance, escorted by a cop. They suspected substances. While I headed to the hospital, I got a call from the cop that he escaped from the hospital again. Then I get a call from the hotel that he was back there drinking in the bar again. I get to the hotel, and he's got 2 women on his lap doing shots. Had his room searched, and they found weed and coke, as well as an abundance of liquor bottles. Story 18. We had a new manager join us last month, fresh out of grad school and brand new to the industry. On his 4th day on the job, we invited him to sit in on a training session for some of our newer lead engineers, since the content was useful for anyone new to the organization. The course was delivered in a classroom setting, and the presenter was a very senior engineer. Midway through the session, new guy walked up to the front and started lecturing about his own experiences and how they tied into the topic. He mentioned his master's degree multiple times. No one knew what to do but stare at him. Story 19. I had someone tell me in an interview that they didn't like children while applying to work at a children's center. When I said this job probably wouldn't be a good fit, they got an attitude and wrote an email to my boss saying I was unprofessional for not giving them a chance. Another employee I had hired at an agency to work with one of our newer clients. Within the first training week, she discovered that her current boyfriend's ex also worked there and threatened, on the clock in front of many others, to hit her with her car. Then she was caught waiting in her car in the parking lot after I told her to go home. That wasn't a fun call to get. Also, very recently, I had someone take a video interview with me who was straight up in bed, like head on the pillow, blankets pulled up. At the end, I let her know that this wasn't FaceTime, and for the next interview, she might want to find a more work-appropriate setting. She didn't seem interested in my advice. In story 20. Oh, it was me. I went to an interview for a crappy call center job about 6 years ago. Had been fired by the crazy woman I worked for, unexpectedly, and was just trying to get something so I could pay rent. We were having a lovely time. The call center helped people with disabilities get jobs, and I was keen to get in and help. They liked me. I liked them. It was going so well. Then they asked me a simple question. Tell us about a time something did not go to plan. Team, I was too comfortable. I got along with them too well. I was smug. I was so sure I had it in the bag. So I opened my mouth, and before I could stop myself, I chuckled and said the following. Well, I'm clearly not great at planning. Here I am in my 40s interviewing for an entry-level job in a call center. It's easy to see that my life hasn't gone to plan. Yep, I did not get the job. Story 21. I was a lead at a LED lighting company, and a new guy was riding shotgun while we were out getting supplies. He had been working there for about an hour when this came out. I mentioned I'm from Wyoming, and he says, yeah, me and some friends were driving through Wyoming once. We went into some small town bar and, well, for lack of a better phrase, they stared at us like we were the idiots in the room. I was like, what did you just say to me? He was quiet for a moment, and I said more forcefully, no, what did you just say? For lack of a better phrase, and you couldn't think of another way to say it again. What did you say to me? Again, he was quiet for a moment and then said, I don't know what you heard, but I didn't say anything. Okay, so this dude drops a slur, for lack of a better phrase, and then is too cowardly to fess up. 2 displays of extreme low character in the manner of moment. While waiting for the supplies to be loaded, I called my boss, told him I'm dropping the new guy off at the shop. Told my boss, I won't have cowards on my team, get rid of him or find someone else, but he isn't working on my jobs. Dude was let go later that day, didn't last more than a couple hours. Story 22. I hired a new senior analyst to the group. I told her that we don't necessarily do things the most efficient way, but I wanted her to learn our current process and follow them for the first few months so that she could understand things. Then she can start making changes on as she's familiar with things. Within 2 weeks, she's roping in other staff members to help her figure out formulas to in the spreadsheets to do things that saved literally seconds. The coworkers quickly grew tired of her for this because these random changes had negative impacts later on, and she claimed that she didn't know, or that nobody told her to not do that. She would often disappear from her desk for long periods of time and take extended lunch breaks. When I called her out on that, she would say that she decided to combine her breaks together. She sometimes claimed to not take her breaks and would leave early because of that. The breaking point came when I noticed her work riddled with errors. I told her that I'd come show her things again. Halfway through explaining things, I hear my phone ring at my desk, so I walk over to check that it wasn't from my boss. I was away for 10 seconds at most. When I came back, I caught her watching music videos on YouTube. I knew at that moment she had to go. Story 23. Before millennials were known as millennials, I had a wave of interview and new hire situation that I could not get my head around. Interviewees with graduate degrees brought in their fiancés, spouses, and parents. Parents were brought in for 90-day reviews and salary raise negotiations. New, entry-level hires were walking into executive meetings uninvited and sitting right down to offer opinions. Demands were being made for slacktivism, opportunities for enrichment. Office playtime, travel, and stock options became compensation demands for everyone down to interns. Jason Freddy's rework became a bestseller, embracing the new millennial, but also setting unrealistic expectations of companies that weren't swimming in passive profit like Basecamp was. This was all bizarrely entitled and childish to me. I would have been mortified to involve my parents in my adult career, and never in a zillion years would I have disrespected or injected myself into senior staff. That's when the millennial studies started to trickle out, and companies started to realize the white-collar game was changing thanks to the tech revolution, plus the way boomers had raised their kids to be special. People take the references to millennial work approaches by older generations as insulting, but let me tell you, it was a pretty shocking shift in candidate behavior when it started. I remember spending a solid couple of years just going, what the hell is happening out there? Story 24. This is pre-pandemic. I worked at a smaller startup, but they somehow managed to score interns from our local college's co-op program. Our interns showed up 60-plus minutes late, their entire first, second, third week. During that time, the only HR individual sent a few reminders about their start time. This culminated in a very clear, "We've tried to tell you the start time is 8 a.m. several times now, and you're not showing up. Is something up?" Styled meeting. This kid tells HR, "Well, I have video game club every day after work, and that can sometimes run well into midnight and beyond. I'm supposed to get 8 hours of sleep. If I go to sleep at midnight, that has me waking up at 8 a.m., and it takes me 30 minutes to get here." HR told him, "There are plenty of gamers on the team with kids and other responsibilities, so that's not a valid excuse. If it happens again, we may terminate your employment." The intern says, "Okay, I can try, but I think it's fair that I sleep 8 hours." Shows up at 9 the next day, gets fired the second he walks in the door. He is taken completely by surprise. He also didn't work when he was in the office. He played with his Rubik's Cube a lot, though. Story 25. I once was part of the leadership team who interviewed and hired a woman as a finance consultant. She was going to be handling back-end configuration of finances of large enterprises. Her background check came back clear. On the first few onboarding calls, remote employee, I could hear a lot of background noise, as though she was in a call center. She would avoid camera at all times. Day 2, she claimed food poisoning, but when took a call, she was again in what sounded like a call center. Finally, not being HR and this not being a part of my usual swim lane, I do a simple Google search. I found out she had several judgments against her still pending for fraud of over $1 million. She also had a pending lawsuit against her for working 4 jobs at a time as a salaried employee. This made me look up her IP address. Her IP would go from the state of HJ to Central Africa multiple times a day. She was having someone log in on her behalf to do her work. When we let her go and recovered the company laptop, there were still browser windows open of her shopping for promiscuous clothing. Did I mention she claimed to have medical bills and the company fronted her the first paycheck out of pure kindness? Good times. Story 26. Years ago, I worked for an accounting firm. He hired a receptionist. At first, she dressed very professionally and did everything right. My boss had given her a 60-day probationary period when he hired her. The 61st day, she came to work in old orange tennis shoes, camo pants, and an old t-shirt. She told my boss she needed a clothing allowance, as she did not make enough to afford office attire, something she had been doing for 60 days just fine. He told her he would think about it, and she needed to go home and change. She started taking 2-hour lunches and doing other things that were out of line, pulling out a tampon and pretending to smoke it on her way to the bathroom, cracking off color jokes in front of clients, things like that, and brought up the clothing allowance thing daily in front of everyone. After close to 2 weeks of this, I walked into my boss's office, closed the door, and told him if he did not fire her, I would quit. I am female, because I could not respect a boss who paid someone who treated her job like this. She was gone within the hour. Personally, I think she just took the job so she could get on unemployment. Story 27. I had this kid in his early 20s insist that he had to have his mom at his interview. Keep in mind, this kid had no illness or mental divergence. He was a perfectly healthy, just out of high school and in community college kid. Also, this was for a job at a sub shop. It was his first ever job interview, so I could understand being scared, but the interview ended up being 15 minutes of his mom explaining why he would be a good fit to clean tables and make sandwiches, and no words from him. When I asked him questions, she would answer, and he sat there quietly or would look at her to answer. After 15 minutes of it, I stopped the interview, stating that I thought I was interviewing the son for a job, not the mother, and that I did not think this would work out. After the interview, I found out from my neighboring stores that the mom wanted the kid to get a job, but the kid didn't want a job, so he was doing everything in his power to tank interviews. Dudes, friends ratted him out to the neighboring store's managers because they knew he would be a horrible employee if hired, and they would have to pick up the slack. Story 28. I have two. One was a guy who worked for me in a call center. He consistently underperformed, and every time I went by his desk, he was talking to someone or watching YouTube. We were in a call center, and he was never on the phone. I told him this with detailed numbers to show him. He flipped out on me, called me a Karen, and threw a chair at me and another supervisor, my boss. He also was escorted out and kicked over a bunch of furniture in the cafeteria on his way out. Other one was just strange. She often took her shoes off, walked around the office, including the bathroom, barefoot. Then she told me she was possibly pregnant. She was like 55, and she wasn't sure who the dad was. She also filed a disability claim because she slipped and fell in the parking lot. We watched footage, and she took a picture of a hole, nowhere near a normal walkway, flung herself on the ground. Then her boyfriend helped her basically stage a slip and fall. It was absolutely wild. She was later let go for insurance fraud because her doctor was completely made up and didn't exist. She forged documents for everything. Story 29. Had one dude show up to the interview in pajama pants with dogs on them. I asked if he liked dogs. His reply, "Nah, man, why do you ask?" Needless to say, not hired. Another time somebody got hired, went through week-long orientation. On her first day on the floor, told where she was going to be, and she just went, "No, I'm not doing that," and walked out. Pretty sure she was just looking to extend unemployment or something. Got weeks' pay for doing nothing. Had another lady, got hired, showed up to her first day, and had all-day orientation. Didn't see her the next day, or even rest of that week. Called her multiple times, left messages. Last one I told her if I don't hear from her by 8 p.m. that day, she would be fired for job abandonment. She doesn't, and I term her. She calls the next day, wondering when she can start. I'm like, "What? You already started and you went radio silent for a week. You're termed." Her reply, "Why are you being so mean to me?" Ugh, so many people don't know how to adult. It's scary. Story 30. We had a guy who came in who was an internal hire, but in a lower level job. We were interviewing tons of people back to back, so we were doing things very quickly and efficiently. We had our question stack and sat down with him. We start asking questions and he interrupts us and says he's made a PowerPoint about himself and would like to present it. He brought his laptop, set it up, and started going through it. It was super personal. He was just a total ass hat and thought this move was going to really impress us. We kept trying to get back to the questions, and he stated he just really wanted to stand out and kept going with his PowerPoint. We dismissed him and started to debrief. We were in a room with frosted glass walls, and I crap you not. He stopped and pressed his ear against the glass to hear what we were saying. My peer saw and went to the door to confront him, and he ran away. We told his current manager about this, and they let him go pretty quick after that. The internal manager was mortified. Story 31. One time I was interviewing a guy my age, 27 to 28-ish at the time, for a retail position. I got to the end of the interview and did the typical, "Do you have any questions for me?" His response, "Yeah, are you single?" in kind of a sing-song voice. He had been a long-time customer of ours and had a lot of charisma, and we had been begging him to apply for a long time. It was one of the first interviews I'd done. We knew we were going to hire him, so it was really mostly for practice for me. Note, he did not know we were planning on hiring him for sure. I felt pretty awkward/embarrassed and replied, "I'm just going to pretend you didn't say that," as I handed him a questionnaire form. As I handed it to him, he saw my wedding ring. Had been married 5-ish years at that point. He said something along the lines of, "Oh crap, I'm just going to leave now." And I told him to just sit down and do the questionnaire. Yes, we hired him. And he, no call/no showed after less than a month. Story 32. I interviewed a candidate who came highly recommended that was at home on Zoom with a towel on her head and wearing a bathrobe. She paused the interview to grab a package from the UPS driver she has a crush on and left me waiting. I was a hard pass when the team circled up to make a hiring decision, but they said with the recommendations, she was perfect for the job. 2 years later, she was suing the company for harassment after 2 years of the worst performance from anyone I'd ever seen. Fortunately, I had opened a case against her with HR and had her on a performance improvement plan, so it helped discredit her in the claim. She got paid out, but less than she demanded. I get taken a bit more seriously now when I say a candidate is a hard no. Story 33. Once I helped my boss interview a candidate. The candidate's cell phone rang during our interview, and he actually answered it. He then proceeded to talk to the person who was calling him to set up a job interview. We let him finish his call and then ended our interview. Another time, I was on a group panel interview with other managers who were also hiring. It was an internal candidate, and when asked questions about previous work scenarios, the candidate talked a lot about when she used to manage a bar and all the crazy people there. My company has nothing to do food/beverage, and the examples were all just really crass and weird. We were all a hard no on hiring her, but my boss hired her anyway. He said his arm was being twisted by her current manager and put her on my team. Needless to say, her work was awful, and I put her on an improvement plan within 6 months, and she left soon after. My boss listened to me better after that. Story 34. Civil and Human Rights Organization was interviewing applicant, and in the middle of the interview, she blurts out she is homophobic. When I asked her what does that mean, she says she hates gay men and lesbians. Like, why are you applying to work at a human rights group? During COVID, doing a job interview on Zoom, applicant is driving an Uber on Zoom. I ask if he should pull over so he doesn't get into an accident. He says he can multitask. He's wearing a wife-beater t-shirt with food stains and cameras on the steering wheel, angled up his nose. There's a lot more. Those are the highlights. And yes, I'm in Florida. Florida man/woman applies for jobs too. Story 35. A guy who wouldn't put his personal cell phone down. Literally, ever. It was the running joke for the short period he was there because he accomplished nothing and would take personal phone calls and proceed to BS loudly with friends and family the entire day in his cube. When his manager brought him in to address the behavior, he cut his manager off in his manager's office to take a phone call and was fired on the spot. Had a woman come in for an interview who had a very high opinion of herself. She refused to answer any technical questions and at the end of the interview basically demanded the job. Yeah, she wasn't hired. Had another guy interview for that same job who would not stop talking and every question would lead back to his personal life and oversharing. I forget what he told us, but at one point he literally said, "I probably shouldn't have told you that." Story 36. I used to hire for a customer service team, very first corporate job sort of role, and I've had a disgusting number of candidates lie about their references. Like, just give me a character reference. I can look up your mate Scotty on LinkedIn and see that he went to school with you. He bloody sounded 15. So I'm always honest with the candidates I rejected for that reason. You lied and it was obvious. But the worst behavior was from a woman who told her trainer, "I hate your accent and think your hairstyle is unprofessional," then refused to be trained by her. And when I brought her into the boardroom to fire her for it, she told me in HR that, "You're liars, I never said that. You're both liars. Liars burn in hell." So that is story 37. Had someone pause her virtual interview to get up, didn't mute herself, started screaming obscenities at her adult child, came back and picked back up like nothing happened. She had to know we could hear her. Needless to say, she was not our top candidate. Story 38. I recommended a friend for a hostess job at a 4-star restaurant where I worked as the head waiter. She was supposed to interview at 4 p.m. in the lounge. At 5, the maitre d' approaches me and says, "Hey, I got to meet with your friend." I asked how she did and he said not very well. Apparently, she showed up for the interview about 5 minutes early, sat herself at the bar, and ordered herself a Long Island iced tea. Only finished about half of it before the interview started, so she took it to the table to sit with my maitre d'. I was ducking humiliated. Be careful who you recommend. Story 39. Interviewed a guy that had a weird resume. Older guy, very experienced, but lots of jobs, and not necessarily upwardly mobile. As an example, he was working a mid-shift at a place when we were interviewing, and he seemed to be trying really hard to impress us on not just what he knew, but who he knew. I figured he was nervous, and I'm pretty good at getting people to relax during interviews, so I continued, and he seemed very much at ease. Maybe too much at ease. One standard issue question about whether he had ever had a workplace conflict, and his answer started with, "Well, I tend to have more problems with women than men." And this was a call center where most of the supervisors and managers were women. I continued the interview out of curiosity more than anything, but I think he realized he had screwed up. Story 40. Probably tame compared to some of the others on here, but a few years ago, I was managing an IT department and told a guy I knew who had some tech skills to apply, and we'd get him an interview. Dude lived like 5 minutes away, and it was summer, and yet for some reason he still showed up late-ish, dressed in street clothes, with a coffee he'd bought at the gas station on the way. At the interview, he walks in, immediately sets his coffee cup in the middle of the HR person's desk, and then sits back and crosses his legs with arms folded behind his head, and just gave the most casual interview ever. Any answers to any non-technical questions were either just awkward or completely off-putting. Even I couldn't help the dude after that. No follow-up questions, seemed super disinterested, It was just very odd considering the opportunity. Story 41. The one that stands out is this lady who arrived in ripped jeans and a hoodie that had definitely seen better days. I try not to judge. I know it's hard out there. She slumps in the chair so far down her chin is in her chest. We start the interview, and for every question, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I even threw out a desperate name a strength and got an I don't know. It was painful. Finally, I end the interview, go to shake her hand, and she asks, did I get the job? The balls, I tell you. Story 42. Right now, we have a dude with no affect. He did stunning in the interview, but when he came to the staff picnic, they were super quiet, and wife seemed intimidated. Semi-important people came up, and he had one-word answers and not even a smile or handshake to his new coworkers. So I'm in a business where our EQ needs to be balanced with IQ. We are reaching out to people who are shy or troubled or who don't trust us. So I'm pondering, I hope it was just a rough day off his current stressful job and being in a crowd of their former college alumni and staff and many exuberantly LGBT or alt. But I've had rough employees before. Like dude who ran a side FT job at work and harassed my grad student and insulted her BF to his face. Story 43. Do substances in our bathroom before coming into the interview is up on the list. Also interrupting constantly, answering questions very rudely, bad interview etiquette from others. Oh, this one lady was hired at an old job who was responsible for covering my breaks, lunch, and bathroom. She tried to get me on a schedule of some sort, literally told me, you need to go at this time and this time, so she can expect it because I interrupted her work too often by needing to pee for 2 minutes once or twice a day outside of my lunch breaks, way before and way after lunch. We got into a huge argument about it, and I eventually left because she was doing other things in my absence that made my job a living hell. Boss didn't give a duck. Story 44. Went through 2 teams interviews with an assistant superintendent candidate and asked him to come in for a face-to-face meeting. I ended up not attending, but others in our hiring group met with him, extended an offer, and hired him. A couple of weeks later, I was making my rounds to sites and ended up on the one we assigned him to. I walked into the job trailer. He came out of his office and asked, is ducking knocking a new concept to you? Go back out and try it again, like this, and knocked on the wall. Then he said, there's a goddamn sign. For background, the only person in the entire company who is above me is the owner himself. Story 45. This one job Googled my name before interviewing. Before applying, it had been a slow Saturday at my current job at the time. So we were joking about flat earthers. I made a GoFundMe offering to walk in a straight line, then board a boat, and just keep going for $950,000. During interview, I gave an example of supporting a site in Alaska. Jokingly, one of the interviewers of 3 was like, that's awful close to the edge. It took me a few seconds, which felt 20 minutes in my brain. Then it clicked. I responded, oh, you saw the GoFundMe. Indeed, they did. I explained it was a joke, how it happened, and apologized if they were flat earthers. Room just burst into laughter. I was hired. Story 46. A youngish man came in for an entry-level position. We like him. He was personable and seemed like he'd pick up the job pretty quickly, so we hired him. Starts on a Wednesday. First 3 days are great. Looking forward to Monday and really training him. We come in on Monday and his car's in the parking lot, but he's not there. We call his phone, no answer. Call his emergency contact, no answer. Nothing. We hear nothing from him. The car stays in the parking lot. The following Monday, he comes into work like nothing happened. Turns out he went skiing for a week with his family and didn't bother to tell anyone that he had a previously planned trip. He was surprised when we told him that he was no longer employed. Story 47. Once had a candidate answer the proverbial, tell us about the time you had to handle a difficult situation question with a fabulous story of him assaulting another coworker, who apparently totally deserved it because even though law enforcement investigated, no one was arrested or fired. Because reasons. As we sat there gaping at him, I attempted to throw him a lifeline. You had to know that was a risky story to share. So, can you explain what you learned from the experience? He pondered the question, acknowledged he shouldn't have lost his temper, and said he tries to count to 10 before letting his temper loose, and that seems to be helping. He sent a very nice thank you note afterwards and mentioned how comfortable he was with us. He didn't make it to the next round. Story 48. I hired a guy for retail. The company only offered minimum wage, part-time, so it was hard to get workers. It was his first week. He came in with a big hole and gash in his arm. He was bleeding through the dirty rag he had on it. He used the sling in the first aid kit to make a terrible-looking, unhelpful bandage. He told about how he and his roommate were drunk and playing some game, and the roommate stabbed him. This was a retail job in clothing. I told him he needed to go get cleaned up and get a bandage on that would keep him from bleeding on the merchandise. He quit on the spot. Story 49. This is low grade. But when I was a manager of a fast food restaurant, I hired someone who was great in the interview. She showed up on time the first day too and was enthusiastic, then proceeded to drink like 8 shots of espresso and throw up in a trash can. I sent her home thinking it was nerves and asked her to come back the next day. She came back, did the same thing, asked for a bathroom break, but instead she smoked a cigarette, which was against company policy. I fired her on the spot. 6 months later, she sends me a text telling me she'd been on a substances binge and being fired was the straw that broke the camel's back and convinced her to go into rehab. Story 50. Brought her boyfriend with her to hang out with me while I work and didn't understand why he wasn't allowed to come in with her. This was a warehouse with card scanners at the door and security guards, not a retail setting open to the public. When she was told he couldn't come in, he stayed in her car and she FaceTimed him for the first hour of her shift while watching the safety training. She would hide her phone when anyone approached, but we knew what was going on. After catching her with it out and telling her the no phone policy, she just left and we never saw her again. Absolutely wild behavior after interviewing, putting together a resume, and showing interest in the job. Why even show up? Story 51. I work in an industry where we have technicians enter people's homes to perform work daily. A technician was hired, no idea why, who did not shower and was clearly mentally ill. He would talk about how he used to work for the FBI and had security clearances and NASA offered him a job. Anyway, a couple of weeks after he was hired, predictably, he was fired. He refused to be fired. He kept saying things like, "Why don't we circle back to this in a couple weeks?" Or, "Yeah, I don't think so." It was the oddest thing I've ever seen. Who refuses to be fired? To be clear, this individual was definitely not in the FBI, nor did he have any security clearances. He was just out there. Story 52. So many in the last few years highlights one. During a lull in customers, pulled out a laptop and started writing a paper. When asked, they said they thought they could do homework during slow time, on the clock. They were upset that there was other work to be done like pricing, stocking, cleaning, etc. 2. Did half day of training and gives me a new list of available hours. Mostly mornings from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. We don't open until noon, and they could not understand why we couldn't have them come in early. 3. A whole batch of bad interviews from people showing up in shredded clothes or no underwear, stoned/drunk, unwilling to write in an application. They wanted to text answers. No shows, refusing to interview with a woman. So much more. Story 53. Interviewed someone for a position as a lawyer at my law firm. She talked about how she had a summer associate position in which she got to work in both litigation and corporate law. The next thing that came out of my mouth was, "Which did you like better?" As soon as I said it, I felt dumb because it was such a ridiculous softball question considering that our firm is and markets itself as 100% litigation. But what do you know? She went ahead and talked about how she hated litigation and knows she would never want to do it. I guess she didn't bother looking at our website before traveling out of a state for a day to interview with us. Story 54. 2 stick out. One was an interview for a financial position. When I asked why she left her previous job, she told me because she was caught stealing money from the company, but quickly added that she wouldn't need to do that at this job because the salary was better. The other one was a guy who told me about his extensive criminal activity. Now, legally, he is required to disclose if he's been convicted of a crime, but no other details. This guy gave me chapter and verse of everything he had ever done, caught or not. He needed the job so he could hire a lawyer to get his record expunged. Story 55. On start day, we sent a new hire to substances/alcohol testing at the local hospital. They tested twice. He was drunk, loaded way beyond legal limits. A couple of limits. My brother was in town. He cried out, "I haven't seen him in years. You aren't going to hold that against me, are you?" We did. Story 56. I was a new hire at a company that kept alcohol in the fridge for celebrations within the office. I was 23 and apparently my brain was still developing, so I thought it was okay to drink the White Claws casually during the workday. HR had to pull me aside and ask if I was depressed and if I had a drinking problem. I was told it had to go on my record and given a warning. Can you imagine I was fired 4 months later for a completely unrelated issue? Story 57. When I was 16 and applying for my first job, one of the places that interviewed me was a 7-Eleven. With all the wisdom of a teenager who's never been wrong about anything, I decided that it had really impressed them with how smart I was if I convinced them I was able to steal from them without getting caught. I hadn't. Never stole anything, but I told them that I'd scoped out the place. I was doing ocular pat-downs before Mac, I guess. Determined their weaknesses, and was able to steal whatever I wanted without getting caught, then return it the next day, again without getting caught. Over 30 years later, and I can still see the expression on that guy's face. Story 58. Hired a new grad, his first job ever. Entry-level work, easy enough. Day 1, he demanded a $3 an hour raise. Day 2, he was bragging that he could run the place within 3 months. End of week 2, he no-call/no shows. Eventually texts me saying he didn't come in because we didn't pay him. I told him it wasn't payday. He found that unacceptable and demanded payment immediately, or him and his brother would be down to see me. Obviously, we terminated him. About 8 months later, I got a recommendation request for him for another job. I could not believe it. Story 59. Another one just popped into my head. Interviewed an Air Force vet. Being a vet myself, you have to completely screw up an interview in order not to get the job. This guy was qualified, but very talkative during the interview. I chalked it up to nerves and hired him. I wasn't able to meet him when he showed up for his first day, so I found him a few hours later to welcome him. I asked how he's doing, and this guy starts in with diarrhea of the mouth and wouldn't shut up. Within the first 15 minutes of talking to him, he told me that he had an adult film addiction and how bad it was affecting his relationship with his girlfriend. Story 60. I'm a woman and a boss. I've seen it all. The worst was when one of the people I interviewed started treating me like I was his direct report and told me how I should be doing things. This guy was applying for a job in an outdoor environment that required walking and was so obese he couldn't walk 3 steps without panting like a husky in Florida summer. Another guy, when we described an example project to handle and asked what he would start with if unsupervised, said he would drink a beer and take a nap. Another guy showed up for an interview with no belt, and I saw his whole butt by the time it was over. Story 61. Asked to finish early to go play tennis one day. Sure, okay. It was a nice day. Next day, asked to finish early again to go meet a new potential housemate. Second time is a bit weird, but it's like, sometimes it happens. Third day, she asked to finish early to go to therapy. Now, that's an acceptable excuse to want to finish early. But after 2 days prior for social reasons as a junior, it wasn't a great look considering her work output wasn't great either. She didn't pass probation for various other reasons though. Story 62. Back in the dawn of time, I worked for the concession company that had the contracts for all of the NASCAR tracks and races in the Southeast US. We hired some locals at Talladega. I grab a group and drop them off to loaf supplies into portable stands. Think narrow with service window and 1 door. I return 10 minutes later with the next group, and big homie has, I crap you not, ducking slammed 3 goddamn cases of hot Busch Light in a can. Hot, like towed in the back of the wrong trailer from Homestead, South Florida, to Bama during the summer hot. Story 63. I used to onboard folks at my last job. They hired one woman in her late 30s who was a superior to me, who, on her second day, told me she was exhausted from having sex all night and provided details. She then proceeded to sleep on her desk. I woke her up politely, then she did it again. I left her alone because I'm not a babysitter, and she slept for 2 hours. She lasted like 3 more months after that, like how? And then got fired for needed to be retrained for the 3rd time on a process she was supposed to be teaching new hires. Story 64 was TDY in California, and my boss asked me to meet up and interview a candidate, so we agreed to meet at the local IHOP the next morning to talk over the job, environment, expectations, etc. He showed up with his wife and toddler and still attempted to have all of us share a booth while I interviewed. His wife was Asian and spoke no English, and his son was 2, and boisterous as toddlers are when expected to sit quietly. I told my boss not to hire him, but they did anyways, and he caused so many issues with the client. Eventually, he was fired after a year of weird, unprofessional behavior on site. Story 65. Okay, I'm not a big fan of substances tests, but the first person they hired in the programming role I took showed up for his first day, so obviously currently high, that they ordered a substances test be administered on site. He'd passed the mandatory test done off-site, and he was escorted out immediately. It was an engineering company, where making a coding mistake could mean dropping a 140-pound drive shaft, spinning at least 10,000 revolutions per minute, that should be held in place by magnetic fields. And that is the best case, for it to drop immediately and wreck the $1 million test stand instead of being put into production in a global market. Story 66. I managed U.S. talent acquisition for a Fortune 50 corporation for 4 years, so I could write a book, literally. Try bringing in your resignation letter on your first day because you got a counteroffer the day before from your current employer. Or filling out an internal application for a new job within the company while still in orientation for your current job you just got hired for. No harassment that. I remember that early, thankfully. During COVID, we discovered we had an employee who had 2 other jobs also, and they were trying to half-ass all 3 for the money. People will prove there is no limit in Story 67. As manager of the gym, I only got to okay the upper management candidates. I did not okay this guy. I told him how I personally knew this guy, and he did not possess the values of our business. I was overruled, and now I had to train him. He ignored everything I taught, and when I called him out on his dismissive behavior, he said these exact words. Look, I only applied for this job so I could direct potential customers to my massage business. I became a massage therapist, so I'm not going to be disinfecting equipment. That was a first day/last day fire. Story 68, retail side here. I worked in a family-owned liquor store. State law says you can serve alcohol if you are 18, but can't drink until 21. Our store policy was no employees under 21. This girl and her friend come in one day to inquire about employment. She was wearing a bikini top, Daisy Duke shorts, flip-flops, and was smacking her gum. You can legally sell if you're 18, right? I said yes, but our store's policy is 21. Of course, I got attitude and then a few cuss words when I wouldn't even give her an application in case I was lying to her. Story 69, not 2 weeks with the company, but he'd been with the company a few months at a larger location with more building maintenance staffing. The third day, he was at my location. It was only him and I on the maintenance team. I needed to be off for a pre-booked appointment. I got an email halfway through the day from the building manager asking if someone else would be coming in to cover, because this guy has left for an hour for his lunch break. Yeah, you have to call another location and have them send coverage before leaving, and that's covered in training. Story 70. We had a fella in my orientation group who apparently told, upon reaching his assigned work destination, his boss's boss that revealing his name was none of the man's business. Upon their first introduction, another failed a substances test administered weeks after clearing the initial screening following the 2-week orientation period. A third received a traffic violation in a rural area, unpaved road, and proceeded to intentionally pepper the officer's cruiser with gravel by peeling out when released, following receiving the citation, all in a company vehicle. Welcome to oil and gas, folks. Wild ride. Oh, and all of these examples were engineers. Not for long. Story 71. Wasn't the manager, but witnessed a guy who started where I work flame out very quickly. First day alone at his desk, he was on the phone half the day talking to his lawyer about his ongoing prosecution for being busted with 2 keys of substances, talking trial strategy and such. Made no attempt at being discreet. Was at a very large financial institution. You have to be fingerprinted and an FBI background check to work at. They will let you start before the background check is complete, and it took 2 weeks before a whole lot of people showed up to the all him out. Story 72. We hired a contractor for an administrative assistant role, and she started on a Tuesday. Wednesday, she called in sick. Thursday, she claimed there was a family emergency, and when asked for further clarification, reveals that she wants to be fully remote, despite the job description indicating that it's fully in office. She was immediately let go. Fastest I've ever seen someone at a federal facility get fired. The best part about this was that she clearly wanted to be entirely remote so she could banana around during the day. Her commute was less than a minute as she lived across the street from the building. Story 73. I think it was about the 2nd or 3rd week on the job when the temp we have covering for a maternity leave sends me a message asking to talk about our returns policy. I'm about to leave for the day, but I go up to the front desk, genuinely thinking she had questions, because it's super simple, yet she keeps flinging it up, and she says to me, "So is being condescending just the company culture? Only if you won't STFU long enough to let anyone else get a word in and can't seem to remember/understand the simplest concepts." Story 74. We would have days when candidates would come in groups to do both group and individual interviews. One time, a candidate came in late, not dressed in their appropriate interview clothing. They had their clothing in one of those plastic dry cleaning bags slung over their shoulder, and the bra I assumed they intended to wear was looped over the hanger and flapping in the wind as they ran past everyone, other candidates and hiring managers, to the bathroom to change clothes. When the candidate came back out, now dressed in appropriate clothing, we kindly told them to leave. It was hard not to laugh. Story 75. We were interviewing someone for a networking position. They worked at Comcast or Xfinity or something in the past as an installation tech. When asked, "What is a situation where you have had a difficult user in the past, and how did you deal with it?" He brought up how often people complain about their service, and his solution was to give them free adult film channels to shut them up. I didn't even know there were adult TV channels, but apparently this guy felt that was the solution to all of his problems. He did not get the job. Story 76. I, female, matters to the story, owned and operated a bar, a grill. I had a young lady strut in asking for the owner, just kind of yelled it through the restaurant. She was looking for a job. So I walked up and asked, "How can I help you?" She looks at me and then my cook, male, and asks him, "Where's the man who runs this place?" He lost it laughing and points to me. The look on her face when she realized she just lost her chance for an interview was priceless. Story 77. I interviewed for a job in another city for which I was very qualified for. The interviews went really well. One of the interviewers followed up with me, and it seemed like a done deal. Then, the headhunter calls me and tells me they will not be making an offer because one of the VPs on the interview team says she didn't think she could work with me because I reminded her of her husband's ex-wife. What the heck? Overall, glad it didn't work out as the company closed 2 years later, but such a weird experience. Story 78. Had an employee in the break room talking about all the substances they had been doing the day prior, didn't show up for work because of car crash. Find out that the crash was because said employee ran her husband off the road for cheating on her. Crash was on the news that played during the day. This employee has been tough to deal with at times and is always not showing up to work. Picked up the phone and called the police with information on the hit and run. She no longer works for me. Story 79. Lying about having triplets. I interviewed this lady, 2 other managers interviewed her, and another did her orientation. Not once did she mention that she had kids. The first shift, she said she had to leave early so she could pick up her kids. The next day, she said she had to leave because one of her triplets was being airlifted to Sioux Falls. The next morning, she called in saying one was sick, and when I mentioned why she was being let go, everyone couldn't believe her story about the kids. Story 80. Not inappropriate at all. But in an interview, once I was asking about things, she took personal pride in things that didn't necessarily go her way and how she overcame those setbacks. She told me she put a bleached container into an autoclave once and gassed out an entire building at her first lab job. I looked down to my notebook and mumbled, "committed war crime," while I pretended to write it down as a way to break the ice, but she wasn't sure if I was serious or not. She looked mortified. Story 81. Had a new intern who asked me several times to sign in to work for him. I did, thinking maybe his Wi-Fi wasn't working properly. About 2 weeks into his internship, I called him about a project. He didn't answer, but instead texted that he was in class right now and would call back. He was in class while on the clock. He was let go immediately. Turns out that's why he couldn't sign in. He was driving to university. Story 82. Nowhere near as bad as some of the others, but I had a new hire come in to do onboarding when I was HR, and she wore fuzzy slippers, pajama pants, a tube top, and didn't take her AirPod out the whole time I was explaining policies to her. She told me she only wanted this job for a month before she finished her nursing program and could find a better job. I don't think she lasted 2 weeks. I have no clue what her interview was like, but I was shocked. Story 83. I was training a new student intern at my funeral home, and on his first day, night really, we were removing a body from a residence. Now we see all sorts of craziness doing this work, so it didn't really faze me when, after we got the lady secured on the stretcher and were preparing to leave, the deceased's son held out his bong and offered us one for the road. I did not expect the intern to say sure and plop down on the sofa to rip a massive hit. Story 84. I used to hire the cans at a home health company. The interview with this guy went so well, one of the best I've ever conducted. I gave him his orientation materials and uniform. All seemed copacetic. Maybe 5 minutes before his first shift, he calls and says his truck broke down and won't be able to get to the clients. After I reminded him we have company vehicles, he went quiet. I'd be embarrassed if my excuse made no goddamn sense at all. Think it through, people. Story 85. Not a manager, but interact with a lot of our company's new hires. The one that jumps to mind for me was the guy that turned up on his first day and announced that wearing his uniform properly was gay, and he wasn't going to take his employee photo like that, in front of several employees and managers that were all wearing their uniform properly. The real kicker was that I'd only asked him to button his shirt up so you could not see his chest and necklace. Story 86. Have a candidate look me dead in the eye, saying he has no criminal history while reviewing his background check, which had a murder conviction, various assault/gun convictions. I will never understand why I had the balls to call out a convicted murderer to his face while we were the only 2 people in the office. But I'm still alive, on the outside at least, completely dead inside, unrelated to this incident. Story 87. Hired a new material handler. Second day, as we are cleaning up, getting ready to leave, the owner's wife, head of accounting, walks through and he loudly says, "Wow, she's got a fat ass." The owner's wife stopped dead in her tracks, turned, pointed at him, and said, "Office, now." I ended up doing 3 more interviews the week after. Story 88. I had a coworker come tell me that a new hire was making fun of her and calling her fat. His supervisor went to talk to him. He was high as a kite, got sent home, not fired amazingly, and told not to show up Monday morning unless he apologized and was sober. Guy never showed up Monday because he was arrested for DUI that weekend. It was not his first offense, and he had no bail money, so he stayed there until trial. Story 89. Guy showed up 15 minutes late for his second interview, where I was talking to him quickly before he met with my boss, who was the GM. Come to find out that he was late because he didn't have a driver's license and had to wait for a ride. He was interviewing for a job as a lube tech at a dealership, kind of a requirement. Then mentioned that his 300-piece toolkit he had was missing some pieces from it. Needless to say, we passed. Story 90. As part of our interview process, there are several levels of security clearances for the final candidate. We always tell them to be honest, as we are looking for someone who doesn't lie. The candidate failed because, in answer to the question, "When was the last time you did substances?" he answered he had done substances that morning. He moaned to us, "Well, you told me to be honest." No sense of how bad this was at all. We had to go back to square one. Story 91. I had a candidate come in with the shortest pair of cut-off jean shorts I've ever seen outside of the Dukes of Hazzard, a baby doll t-shirt and sandals. This was for a software engineering position. The best part was when she said, "Sorry, I don't have a copy of my resume. I had to come straight from work and didn't have time to go home and get one." I asked where she was currently working. It was a similar position at another software company. Story 92. We had a candidate talk in vivid detail during her second interview about her life and how she keeps her boyfriend satisfied. All attempts to bring the conversation back on point were unsuccessful, so the interview concluded early. Another candidate told me they didn't like helping people. The interview was for a customer service role. They said they would be really passive-aggressive, so no one asked them for help. Thanks for the honesty, I guess. Story 93. I have a couple. One guy dropped F-bombs through the entire interview. When interviewing for my team, I would do the first part of the interview. Then I would have a team member come in and conduct a short peer interview with me out of the room. I would explain to the candidate the entire interview process and introduce the peer. After I left the room, a guy asked the peer, "Who are you and why exactly am I talking to you?" Story 94. Hired a guy who started training. It was an interactive Zoom training for a group of about 20 new hires, showing them how to use a particular system. Broke for lunch, came back and started training, and the guy spent the next 45 minutes shirtless on his treadmill. Sent him a private message asking him to stop and to engage in the meeting. He didn't respond until after he was off and said he was paying attention. He didn't last the day. Story 95. I was interviewing a guy, and mid-interview, he told me that we didn't need to do the interview because his uncle worked for the company and told him he'd get this job. I thanked him for his time and flunked him for the interview. HR grabbed me later and I explained what happened. They were like, "We need bodies, so he's probably getting the job anyway." I was like, "I don't care, just don't associate my name with his hiring." Story 96. My new employee chews tobacco and had a spit cup at his desk. Not allowed and disgusting. I've had to talk to him 3 times about not bringing it to the office. A few weeks ago, I came out of my office and he was eating a full slab of ribs at his desk. Story 97. 15-ish years ago, potential applicant approached me while working at a coffee shop. They said they saw our job posting on the internet and wanted a paper copy of the job application. I let them know the application was online only, and they threw a big huffy tantrum. "But I don't have internet access," they insisted, practically screaming at me. Asked them calmly, "How did you find the job opening again?" The realization dawned on them, and they just walked off. Story 98. Oh, I have so many. One sticks out though. I had an interviewee tell me that she is leaving her current job because she is a lesbian, and they are discriminating against her due to that. She told me she was a lesbian 15 more times during the interview. At times when it wasn't even necessary. Like after a basic question, she would answer, "As a lesbian." No, I didn't hire her, and it wasn't because she was gay. Story 99. I was in my late 20s and was managing a team. Admittedly, I always looked younger than my age. Brought a candidate in for an interview. At some point in the interview, he rocked his chair back so he was balancing on the back 2 legs, put his feet up on my desk, stroked his goatee, and said, "Aren't you a little young to have this job?" Story 100. Can I give one for a manager instead? This dude at Microsoft, vaping during meetings in conference rooms to talking about how much yellow fever he had since coming back from the call center in the Philippines. He'd offer to get our team pizza, and then suddenly put his head down and have a migraine and need to leave around 1 p.m. Then we'd see him at the golf course on Facebook. What's the most unprofessional thing you've ever done at work? Story 1. I used to work at a sports store, and on a really slow day, we received a new supply of crossbows. These crossbows were so awesome that I just had to shoot it. So I run to my manager, who I was really close to, and I say, "Do you want to shoot at crap with these crossbows? Before you say no, just think about how awesome it'll be." His response was, "Duck yeah, I want to shoot crap with the crossbows." So we grabbed a bunch of broken or flawed items we couldn't sell anymore and just shot at them for the rest of our shift. One of the best days at work ever. Story 2. Second year teaching, working in a really rough urban high school, giving my lesson to the class when I walk towards the center of the room and feel something thud on my back. Can't breathe. Feel a weight on my neck and shoulders. Constriction. I put my hands to my throat and feel a kid's arms there. I am being choked out in the middle of my own class. Hear the kid laughing in my ear. Mind is racing. No idea what to do. Squeak out the word "stop." Kid is still laughing. "Stop! Now!" Class is all standing up. Everyone is going insane. The thought that my room is directly across from the principal's office crosses my mind. I'm just standing there frozen and starting to get tunnel vision. Think how it's just like the movies, where the circle of vision starts to close in, and all I can see is one face at a time, laughing and whooping it up. Pull the arm away just enough for me to say, "Stop, now, or I am going to hurt you." feel like I'm about to pass out. Another second or two passes, and I'm standing still with this kid hanging from my neck, and my class is going insane. My young career looks like it's about to slip away with my vision. Reaction. Grab the kid's arm and flip him over my shoulder, and when he lands on the ground, I twist him onto his stomach and put him into a hammerlock, pulling his wrist up towards his neck. I'm full of adrenaline and very upset. My knee is in his back, so he can't move. In between deep inhales, I just whisper into his ear repeatedly, "Are you ducking insane? I will end you. I will duck you up." My head clears. The room is silent. I can breathe again, and I have this kid twisted up on the floor, with all my weight digging into his back and his arm farther into a hammerlock than I have ever put someone. The entire class is standing around me, just staring. I remember one kid just had his mouth hanging open like, "What the duck?" I stand up, look around the room. Think about the principal, see this kid still hasn't gotten up. I kneel down and help him to his feet, and immediately change my effect back into teacher mode. "Are you okay? Do you need to go to the nurse?" He shakes his head in the negative. "You know, jumping off of chairs in class is dangerous. You can land pretty hard and hurt yourself. You really shouldn't do that." Some of the kids in the room begin to understand what I'm getting at. "So I can write you a pass to the nurse so you can get an ice pack for your shoulder. You looked like you landed pretty hard when you jumped off that chair." I see the kid realize what I'm saying. The rest of the class does as well. The kid is just standing there, holding his shoulder, thinking. He says, "No, I'm okay," and walks back to his seat and sits down. The rest of the class follows, and I just walk back to the chalkboard and continue my ducking lesson like nothing happened. Needless to say, I got a lot of respect from the kids after that, even though no one ever directly brought it up again. I do really wish it had never happened, though. Story 3. Spent an entire 8-hour day browsing this website. Pretty good day at the office. What did you do today? I was a lab supervisor. Most days were really busy, but there were days when projects were completed, and my techs didn't have any issues with their projects, so there wasn't much I could do. Story 4. As a caddy, I was told not to touch the grips of a golf club because my sweat is different from his sweat. I rubbed the grips on my balls when he wasn't looking. Story 5. Some lass wants to do BJ in the hope she could get Friday off work. I didn't realize what she was getting at until afterward. She'd been dropping subtle hints about wanting it off so she could go out for her friend's birthday. She approached me in the supervisor's office, and the magic happened. I would have happily given her the time off, with or without the BJ. I wasn't her supervisor, though. Story 6. I worked at a pool, and anytime it got hazy or looked like it was going to rain, we would have someone go out and bang on the dumpster because it sounded like thunder. Hello, break time. Story 7. Well, I don't know if it counts, but this was during Army duty, so I guess it was work for me, because after all, I got paid about $10 a day. So my company was doing some drills at the archipelagos on the coast of Stockholm. I was injured, so I got stationed on a beach looking for ships so they wouldn't enter a certain area because we were having drills with tanks and live ammo. Anyhow, I got a ride out to a frozen beach in mid-January with a sack of firewood, a radio, and some food. After a few hours being a bored kid, there wasn't really much choice but to master. I stood there with my pants at my ankles, looking out at the sea, and felt like the king of the world in the bonfire. Story 8. My last week on a call center, I took the evening shift to work with some of my favorite coworkers. They were goofing around and joked about a girl that fancied me a bit and asked me how big I thought her boobs were. I replied that I couldn't tell unless I'd had them in my mouth. Very immature, but hey. So one of my female coworkers thought it was funny to type the girl an email saying something like, "Wants to get way too close to you to check something and wants to pretend to click it to mess with me," and then accidentally click send. I offered to take the blame since I was leaving the company anyway, but she wouldn't have it. So we called someone from it at his home, had him come down and reset the girl's passwords so we could enter her mailbox, delete the message, and defuse the situation. The AT guy sent her an email about some virus and an account reset, and we showered him in gratitude. Story 9. I worked my second real day at a retail job when I was in my early 20s, was at the cash register one day. Dealt with an irate customer who decided to throw coins at the counter, so I had to pick them up off the floor. I asked her to stop, she continued and called me a name, at which point I threw all of their merchandise on the ground from the counter, walked out, never came back, even to pick up what little money I'd earned of a paycheck. Just left the awful customer, the counter, and the store to handle itself. Story 10. I used to work as the night manager at a 24/7 truck stop gas station. Where to begin? I pleasure in the cooler. I got a BJ in the cooler. I got a BJ in the bathroom. I had sex in the back office. I got drunk at work. I smoked at work every night. I tripped on MDMA at work. I did donuts in a sheriff cruiser during a blizzard at work. I ate/drank anything I wanted and didn't pay for it. I did a lot of stupid crap there, but the following takes the cake. One night I was in the back office due substances. I don't remember the exact reason, but I was interrupted and had to go up front and run a register for a bit. When I left the office, I closed the door and it automatically locked. Dumbass me had left the store keys on the office desk. So I was locked out of the office and there was a big pile of substances laying on the office desk. If it was still there when my boss showed up at 6 a.m., my coworker and myself would surely be crap canned. So I devised a straight-up Mission Impossible style plan. This gas station had a drop ceiling, and I figured that I could just climb up through the drop ceiling and make my way into the office and drop back down. What I didn't expect was the wall going from the floor to the roof. So I did what any desperate person would have done in my situation. I punched a hole in the wall and tore away the drywall until I could fit through it. I then climbed through the hole, made my way into the office, finished rolling, and unlocked the office door. With the hole in the wall concealed above the drop ceiling, my boss was none the wiser, and I kept my job for another day. Story 11. A coworker crop dusted my office, so I walked into his and tried to fart on him, but I crapped myself. I then cut the soiled part out of my underwear and flushed it down the toilet. Story 12. Messy sex in a truck stop. Working at a truck stop as a teenager. The place is a bit dingy and looked a bit 80s. Which wasn't great given that I was working there in the late 90s. There's a pretty girl that works the store area, and I'm working in the back cleaning or doing general repairs. She's older than I am by a year or two, old enough to be in university while I'm still in high school. She grew up a farm girl and had that sweet personality. Her long lashes, jet black hair, and very fit figure made her the interest of every male patron and employee. At 5'6", she weighed maybe 120 pounds and most of it was in her breasts. At the end of one shift, during which we did our usual flirting routine, she asks if I want to hang out after. I assume she's joking. She's beautiful, like stop mid-step and stare beautiful. My friends that had seen her felt the same way. I come out of the back and head for the door. She's waiting for me. She's smiling at me. "Think we can find a private place here?" she says. This is more serious than I thought. With a straight face, though I was beaming on the inside, I say laundry room. And we head there apart from each other so we don't draw suspicion. There's a large bench for folding and storing towels and clothes. She pushes me onto it. She's the aggressor. I'm still trying to figure out if this is going to end up a practical joke. Like she jumps off when I'm naked and laughs as everybody pops out from around the corner. My pants are off. I'm sitting bare-assed on towels people will be using in a shower later. It feels so good. Suddenly, I'm soaked. What the duck just happened? Was I peed on? Seriously, she peed on me? She's embarrassed. Face red. She's off me. She finished, she tells me. I don't know what that means. We talk briefly. I'm relieved. I pull her back on, and she bounces hard, fast. I thrust up to meet her lowering hips. I'm finished. She hops off. We are done. The towels are soaked. I was naked all over them. Somebody used them to wash their face and dry their bodies. Story 13. Probably getting belligerently drunk and simultaneously crapting and barfing in my cubicle. It's a rare and special experience to expel fluids and waste from both ends at the same time. Really makes you reconsider some current life choices. Story 14. Used to work in a restaurant. Me and two of my coworkers used to get high while working 13-hour shifts. It was the only way we could get through the day. We would take shifts going into the car and blazing up. Anyway, one day while we were all stoned, we decided it would be a fun idea to pour a bottle of honey inside the espresso coffee grinder. For anyone that has worked in an Italian restaurant, you'll know how important an espresso is at the end of a meal. This occurred on a Saturday evening, the busiest of times for most any restaurant, in an establishment that comfortably seats 300+ people. When another coworker went to make an espresso instead of finely ground coffee, he received a globular, gunky, gelatinous mass of coffee. The owner didn't know who did it, and we wouldn't eat each other out, so he called an impromptu staff meeting and in so vague terms put out a $5,000 bounty on the head of the mother ducker trying to ruin his business. Story 15. I used to wear a costume and shake a sign outside to advertise for a Halloween store. It isn't as humiliating as you'd think, most people ignore you, but it's painfully boring. My favorite costume was a giant pickle one, because I could hide my head and one arm inside while shaking the sign with the other and browse Reddit or watch entire movies. I'm so glad Halloween season is over. Story 16. I was drinking at a firm-sponsored happy hour with my coworkers. Things are going great, beer is flowing, the wings are great, and people are laughing. Somehow the discussion turns to slang, and I stupidly blurt out, "Dirty Sanchez!" It would have been just fine until one of my female managers tasked what it was. So I berated her for not knowing, and then described it in great detail, with finger movements. It's been 10 years, and I still get called out on it. Story 17. My friend had a summer job at a factory where there are many older people working. One old man used to playfully joke with my friend, and my friend would joke back. Then one day my friend responded to a joke with, "If you don't shut your mouth, I'm going to get naked and beat the crap out of you." He got fired. Story 18. When I was probably 18, I was working at a grocery store in the deli department. The produce department office was conjoined with the deli, separated by a swinging door. One day, me and the produce guy were prancing each other back and forth, and I got the last move in by taking the fire extinguisher and kicking through the door and letting the contents of the extinguisher loose in the produce office. And boom! Within 3 seconds, the thing was empty, and the room was a cloud. My buddy was just like WTF and fell on the floor laughing. We cleaned up the powder or whatever it is and continued as if it never happened. Never got caught even though we should have. Story 19. I'm a travel stock photographer. I have quite a nice street photo of a European city. There's a dude walking with 2 girls obviously scratching his balls. I sell the image anyway. Not sure if one can call it unprofessional, but I felt a little bad. Story 20. It was a slow day at the ice cream store, so I covered my hand in dipping chocolate and hung out in the walk-in freezer until my hand looked like Chubbs from Happy Gilmore Story 21 was working at a small web design firm. It was just myself, an intern, and the art director in one room, really cozy ordeal, but our equipment wasn't that great. The director was a good friend of mine, and we'd prank each other every now and then. But one day, I totally crossed the line. His PC had too many applications open on it, and since it was going so slowly, decided to jump on my PC to render a 3D file on my own PC after I clocked out without telling me. The next morning, I show up and get an email from him saying that he was up late, the render didn't work right, and that he would be in at noon. Fair enough, I jump on my PC, and without a director or order, decided to catch up on my messages and check my DeviantArt inbox. I find that he closed down the file I was working on and saved it to a server I didn't have admin access to. I also see the 3D program open, all his stuff open and chewing up all my RAM to render the last few seconds of the animation. Turns out, the director also decided to check his DeviantArt when he jumped on my PC, and he didn't log off. Since he had made my PC incapable of doing anything through some rather harmless oversights, I decided to harmlessly prank him back with his DeviantArt account. I jumped onto the browse page and ran a query for the most offensive pixels could make. And DeviantArt delivered in bountiful supply. I started adding them to his favorites, one after another, until I had spent a good 5 minutes favoriting almost 200 of the most egregious the collective internet could yield. Figured I'd leave it in the background. Just let it be a silly little thing for him to later discover. I logged off, let it manifest and rear its ugly head days down the line. What I didn't expect, when he came into work, he found that his front page was inundated. It was top to bottom flooded with comments, so on and so forth. Pages upon pages of strange people obsessed with adult films showering him with thanks for all the faves. I didn't expect that part to happen, but when it did, I immediately started laughing and wasted no time fessing up to what I did. I thought it was the greatest prank I'd ever pulled. Something we clink beers over, slaps on the back, a nefarious, I'll get you next time gadget, over nachos. But no, he was livid, screaming, totally losing his head, going nuts and shaking with unadulterated seething rage. Literally shaking. His voice broke and quivered throughout his shrieking diatribe at what I had done. See, it wasn't the fact I faved a bunch of adult film that threw him off and made him upset. I found out the hard way that my good friend of many years was fiercely homophobic. He respectably kept it stashed away, knowing it was taboo, knowing it was a losing fight, but still being honest with himself that deep inside, he's not comfortable with gay people. And with my stupid antics, I brought it to the forefront and had to force him to confront outside his own psyche his deep homophobia. I still kept my job. He didn't make any efforts to reprimand me for it, even though I feared he would. But it really did put a damper on our friendship because I never knew that somebody I'd called a friend for so long was struggling with a feeling he knew would be deemed taboo if brought to the front. Would not favorite hundreds of adult film drawings again. Story 22. I once left my computer unlocked at work. In the department I was in at the time, this was a very bad thing to do, as rather dodgy emails could be sent round, highlights of which included one coworker expressing his love for rabbits, another renouncing his love of women in favor of men, and another offering to sell their car so they could afford to get a rent boy down at the docks. All standard stuff, really. And then they got to me. One of my esteemed colleagues got into my email and sent round an email to my desk, my housemate and his somewhat large ex-girlfriend asking if they were up for a group sex. Looking back, it was pretty ducking funny. However, it got worse from there. The crap didn't just hit the fan, the midden hit the windmill. The ex-girlfriend put in a complaint about how she felt ashamed, abused, and generally bullied. I'm inclined to agree. The next morning after the emails were sent round, our manager's manager dragged us all into the office and gave us a right royal rollicking. It was worse than being shouted at by DCI Gene Hunt. The man left Gunnery Sergeant Hartman standing. And then HR got involved. We were all called up to individual meetings and had to explain what went on. Apparently, the sender of the FAP email had to read this out loud in his meeting, barely maintaining a straight face. As a result of that little stunt, everyone involved did not get a pay rise or bonus that year. The human beach ball, housemate's ex-girlfriend, was eventually fired for being chronically useless. Still think it was ducking. Hilarious. And worth it. Story 23. Once upon a time, I was an entry-level rent-a-cop for a security company here in town. My first assignment was to monitor a hazardous area at night after the environmental protection cleanup guys had left. For those who don't know, pulling security at an EPA site is generally a joke. There's nothing to do for 12 hours other than make sure an idiot doesn't climb a fence and create a lawsuit. In those 12 hours, you can get creative. To set the scene, this particular job had me sitting in a mobile office of sorts, a sheet metal box on wheels. This box also doubled as the break room for the workers during the day who also had their own office unit right next to the one I'd sit in. These units sat next to a railroad depot in the bumduckest part of Bumduck. So with that in mind, let's move on to my unprofessionalism. For starters, yes, I pleasure a lot. I read books, played my DS for hours on end, even brought my laptop in to teach myself chess and watch movies. There were several nights where I'd go and sit in my car to take a nice nap and make it appear that I was watching the site from afar. One night, I spent several hours catching flies and then interrogated them in front of each other like a scene out of a cop movie. Along with this, I had recently had my wisdom teeth removed and been prescribed some painkillers similar to hydrocodone. I'd get to work, pop one for the pain, and spend the next several hours in a very happy state where I would be incredibly interested in whatever I was doing, chess for example. The greatest act of unprofessionalism, and irony by far, however, was the night that I broke into the office unit next door. One night in particular, I was piddling around on my laptop and noticed that there was a strong Wi-Fi connection nearby. It was obviously being broadcast from the EPA's office trailer, and the allure of endless internet tomfoolery was too great to pass up. My mission started with a scout run. I checked all the doors, windows, and potential entrances with my flashlight, looking for any possible weakness. Everything appeared to be locked, save for one lone window that gave me some wiggle room. I used a paint bucket to stand up at the base of the window, and a pen to jimmy the screen off. I then used the same pen to wiggle the locks and free the window itself. A few times during this process, it took a while, a train would go by, so I'd casually act like I was just doing a patrol. After I finally got the window open wide enough to crawl in, I hoisted myself up and started looking around the trailer. Eventually, I found the router and a sticky note that appeared to be a Wi-Fi code and scribbled it on my hand. I then took the time to make sure everything was in place as I left it, locked the window, and replaced the screen. I get back to my laptop and wrong password, duck. I took a moment to collect myself and repeated the above process again and finally got the right code. After that night, I really started to like working at that place. Story 24. A few years ago, I started working as a shipping manager for a local shop that sold imported foods. It was a family business, and I was so excited because I was brought in to establish a gift basket program, build the brand, etc. I worked my ass off. The owners had all the troubles new owners face, but they were also very nasty people, kicking out customers from their patio seating because they had visible tattoos. This was in a fashionable area of a very urban city, so many of the clientele would have tattoos, but also have a lot of money. After a few years, I just had to call it quits. The last straw came when the bakery manager gave me a muffin from a batch that had gotten slightly burned. I saw the owners digging through the trash to find my receipt for it. I typically bought one pastry a day anyways, like clockwork employees were expected to save all their receipts to prove they weren't stealing. Anyways, instead of just asking me about it, they decided to bring it up after the fact when I had to pester them for an annual review. The review scored me a 2 in terms of teamwork because they thought I had stolen this muffin. I wrote a resignation email, but BCC'd everyone else at the company as well. Everyone. Here's the email I sent. It's with a heavy heart that I am resigning from X. While I regret the abruptness of my departure, I can't justify being part of an organization that has shown how little confidence it has in both myself and its own future. It's mostly due to recent circumstances, a 2 really, but mainly the result of a continuing trend, which has repeatedly been towards astoundingly poor and often baffling decision-making. I thought we were working towards a collective goal, towards building something, but I no longer trust that you have a real vision in mind, or how to succeed in making it a reality. Success is measuring an area correctly. Survival is your current reality. Perhaps when the majority of your staff are either so bitter at your treatment of them, they'll tell you otherwise, but yes, they really are, or just weary from all the joyless disorganization, you need to take some real measures to fix it. And maybe not in the slipshod, slapdash amateur approach that has become so frequent that you accept their results without learning how to improve upon them. I'm sure you'll find a way to mitigate all of this. His heart wasn't in it. He wasn't the right guy for the job. He had too much on his plate. But you'd be wrong. My heart was in it. I was the right guy for the job. And the workload rarely bothered me. Maybe one day you'll figure it out. Story 25. Got absolutely hammered. It was my friend's last day at a pizza place we worked at, and I had one of the delivery drivers pick up a bottle of whiskey. After 10 p.m., we took a shot every time a new order came in. We killed the whole bottle in about 2 hours. Also a few joints now and then. Also not me, but one time I saw a coworker stuff some wings down his pants. Story 26. Openly drank at work. Had a small bar set up in a document box. This was at a law firm. Threatened a coworker with deadly harm after he threatened to beat the crap out of me. Story 27. I was in between jobs a few years ago and ended up reluctantly taking up a job with a friend who worked in a call center. This place was basically targeting elderly folk in Midwest and Southern states by saying they won a vacation and we needed bank info to deposit their winnings. Complete bullcrap and a scam only your grandparents would fall for. My friend's manager sat me down the first day and went over some selling tactics with me. Real scummy type stuff. Ask how wonderful it feels for them to be able to buy their grandchildren that Disney vacation, etc. After the first day, I got good at it, like really good. Talking to them about their family, getting to know them, and then handing them over to my manager, who would in turn empty out the bank account within a few hours. After the first week, I felt wrong and my results started to show. My manager said something along the lines of not considering these people just bank accounts. That's ducked. So my next call, I dialed a number in Montana, I think. Buddy picked up, and I tried my best to pitch my bullcrap to no avail. He just wasn't buying it. So after a long pause, I leaned into my desk and whispered this into my headset. Listen, sir, I'm working at an illegal call center. We rip off bank account info from senior citizens, and it's making me sick. Get a pen, I'm going to give you the address of this place. When we hang up, call your police department and tell them where this office is. I'm about to quit. Story 28. Worked at Domino's as a driver when I was in college. When we were slow, we were required to go in the back of the shop to fold boxes. I started a tradition of doing this naked. Coworkers were shocked at first to see a naked guy folding boxes, but it caught on. Story 29. In high school, I was a busboy at Outback Steakhouse. Lunch was around 12 o'clock. School was released at 2:30. Track practice was over by 5. Work at 6 to 10:30-ish. As you can imagine, I was starving every time I worked. Cleaning up after people who had left food on the table would be torture. Sometimes it would be too much for me, and I'd eat someone else's to go box or something. I remember one night an entire macaroni and cheese was left in the bowl, and it looked so good. So I snuck it into the bathroom, as not to be seen, and devoured the entire bowl. I didn't get caught, luckily. It was too real. Story 30. I work at a coffee shop, and for whatever reason, we had to stay open all night Black Friday. Sometimes we would go hours without a single customer. So we took the giant cart thing that we used to wheel trash out to the dumpster and rode it like a scooter down the road and throughout the parking lot. It was actually really sweet. Story 31. I worked at Starbucks for 7 years. By year 3, I got pretty damn good at my job. Good enough that on our secret customer reviews, I earned the only perfect score, 5 stars and 100% in the last 10 years of that store. So on the one hand, I was good at my job. On the other hand, I was bored and didn't give a duck, and I got complacent. So good at my job, but crafty employee. Here's a list of some of the unprofessional crap I did at work. Got high with my supervisor huffing the whipped cream chargers. Melted plastic cups in our oven to see what would happen. Accidentally started small fires in the oven, also trying to see what would happen. Stole merchandise and supplies for my own use. Got second-degree burns from molten sugar, trying to make caramel in our oven. Climb our 10-foot shelves with 50-pound boxes on one shoulder while doing inventory. To be fair, our ladder was broken. People nicknamed me Spider-Man for this. Threw drinks at my coworkers while we were working drive-thru. Usually we would do this to each other and catch the drinks, then hand them off. Kept things fast and fun. Sometimes people walked in the way of a thrown drink. Asterisk started a bottle cap dodgeball game that spanned months in our store. All the guys and some of the girls would keep the caps from every container they opened throughout the day. And anytime we could get away without a customer noticing, we would launch one as hard as we could at another coworker. When we got off our shifts, it was all-out war. Asterisk started a late-night baseball league with my coworkers using expired pastries when they told us we couldn't donate them to homeless people anymore. We'd use the bat I kept in my trunk, and if you could make a pastry explode, then you got a home run. Story 32. Worked in the graphics/publications department at a small biotech company. Crafty job, crafty pay, crafty company owners. But the other people in the department, that were great. We used to go out to lunch together most Fridays, generally to a nearby Mexican place that had delicious and dangerously cheap wine margaritas, basically a citrus sangria. Usually, we'd cut ourselves off after one or two or sometimes three, but one time we were apparently in a drinking mood and we sat there swilling them down steadily for the entire lunch hour, plus probably another 15 or 20 minutes. Our bosses were almost never there on Friday afternoons. They were usually off drinking themselves, and for whatever reason, our department had a ridiculous amount of leeway for just screwing around. We staggered back to the office, only to discover that A, the bosses were actually there, and B, they wanted to talk to us, well, to me specifically, about a current project. They crossed the large open workspace and loomed over my desk. I pushed myself casually back from the desk to talk to them and whoop, pushed a little too hard and did a glorious flip backward, ass over tea kettle, wheeled chair and all, in a miniskirt and a thong. The one saving grace was that I was too drunk to really get embarrassed. And weirdly, I was promoted to department manager about 6 months later. Yeah, I have no idea how that happened either. And now anyone who has ever worked at that company will know exactly where/whom I'm talking about. I wonder if that Mexican place is still there. Story 33. This is actually going on right now, and I'm not proud of it, but I don't want to stop it either. I work in an international company and have many colleagues all over the world. So there's that one guy from another country, and we basically do the same stuff at work, and we are in contact every day by email and our company messaging system. We call each other almost We never met and only know each other from photographs. So a few weeks ago, our relationship turned somehow from being just coworkers to being special friends. What means we started to flirt, and suddenly we started to send us dirty messages. By now, we spend a significant amount of time writing hot scenes to each other. He has such a dirty fantasy, and I love it. So he usually describes some erotic scene with us, and we just go along with this during the day. We also talk about other things, but usually not for long before we are having dirty talk again. He is married, and as I said, we live in different countries, so nothing is going to happen in real life. It's just so exciting to come to work and to wait until a message pops up from him, and I don't want to stop it. I realize that this is kind of dangerous and absolutely unprofessional, and I deeply hope nobody in the office will ever find out about this.